Some of the best work often happens right in our own backyards, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's where community-based organizations, CBOs, really shine.
Exactly. These are the groups, often volunteer-run, just trying to make their local communities better places. And if you're listening, maybe you're part of one or thinking about it.
And you're probably wondering how to make sure it's all running properly, effectively, and importantly, legally.
That's the tricky bit sometimes, which is why today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, the legal side of things for CBOs.
Yeah, and we're leaning heavily on some great work done by the Southern Africa Litigation Centre, SALC. They've put out some really practical capacity strengthening info on this.
Fantastic. Because, let's be honest, legal compliance can sound, well, a bit daunting.
It can, but it doesn't have to be. We're going to try and break down what SALC advises into really understandable steps. The idea is to empower CBOs, give them the confidence to operate well.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. When SALC talks about CBOs, what's their sort of core definition? What is a CBO in their view?
Well, according to SALC, it's fundamentally an organization that operates within a community. Its main goal is improving the well-being, the overall functioning of the people living there.
Right.
And SALC really highlights their reliance on volunteers.
Yeah.
And this aim of building the community's own ability, its capacity, to handle socioeconomic issues and meet its own needs.
So it's about self-sufficiency, building from the inside out, not just waiting for outside help.
Precisely. Empowering the community itself.
Now, SALC seems to really stress getting some kind of legal structure in place and, following the rules. Why is that so important, especially for these grassroots groups?
That's the key point they make. Having a legal structure, even a simple one, brings benefits. SALC mentions things like clarity, accountability.
Mm-hmm.
It helps build trust with the community.
Mm-hmm.
And crucially, SALC points out that, laws change.
Yeah.
In many places now, there are actual legal requirements.
Mm-hmm.
You need some form of registration or compliance just to operate legally.
So it's not just nice to have, it can be essential for staying afloat and being seen as legitimate.
Exactly. It might feel like bureaucracy, but SALC frames it as vital for long-term survival and impact.
Okay, so if a CBO decides, right, we need to formalize this, what are the main options SALC lays out? What kind of structures are we talking about?
SALC outlines a few common legal routes. One of the probably simplest in concept is the voluntary association. You might also hear it called a common law universitas.
Universitas. Okay, sounds a bit old school. What does that mean practically for a CBO?
Yeah. Think of it simply as an agreement. Two or more people agree to work together, formally, for a nonprofit purpose.
Okay.
And the interesting thing SALC notes is that legally, this agreement can sometimes just be verbal to be recognized. But, and this is important, if that VA needs or wants to register under specific MPO or NGO laws, maybe to get funding or for other reasons, then of course they have to meet those specific requirements.
Got it. So simple to start, maybe, but layers can be added depending on what you need to do. What's another structure SALC mentions?
Another one is the trust. This is definitely more formal. It involves creating a specific legal document called a trust deed.
A trust deed.
Right, yeah. So basically, a founder puts assets, money, maybe property, into the trust. These are then managed by trustees for the benefit of certain beneficiaries, and all according to the specific objective written down in that deed.
And who makes sure the trustees are, doing what they're supposed to? What's the compliance angle there, according to SALC?
SALC stresses that the trust deed itself must be written. It also needs to be properly attested, signed in front of a notary public, and then formally registered with the Master of the High Court, or the equivalent body.
Okay, so there's official registration involved there.
Yes, that registration provides oversight. The deed is the rule book, essentially. It dictates the CBO's purpose and what the trustees can and can't do. It's definitely more structured.
Right, more paperwork, more formal steps. Okay, what's the third main type SALC points to?
The third one is the nonprofit company, or NPC. This is basically setting up a company under the country's company laws.
Like a regular business?
Well, yes and no. It's registered like one, using something like, say, South Africa's Companies Act, as SALC mentions. But its core purpose isn't profit for owners or shareholders. It's set up specifically to pursue a nonprofit objective.
Okay, and the compliance key there, is it just like any other company?
According to SALC, the main step is registration with the Registrar of Companies, or whatever the relevant authority is called in that jurisdiction. You follow the company law procedures, but with that nonprofit status clearly defined.
Okay, so we have voluntary associations, trusts, nonprofit companies. Now, SALC also talks about registration as an NGO NPO. How does that fit in? Is that a fourth type of structure?
That's a really good question, and SALC clarifies this well. Registering as an NGO or MPO isn't really a separate legal structure itself. It's more like an additional layer of registration required under specific NGO or NPO laws.
Oh, I see.
So SALC gives examples. In Malawi, under their NGO Act, pretty much all NGOs have to register this way, regardless of whether they started as a VA or a trust. Right. Whereas in South Africa, SALC notes registering under the MPO Act might be optional generally, but required if you want to do certain things, like sending money outside the country.
Okay, that makes sense.
The key thing SALC emphasizes is, if you do register under an NGO MPO law, either because you have to or choose to, you then absolutely must follow all the specific rules laid out in that particular law.
Right. It adds another set of compliance requirements. So SALC gives some country-specific examples. Let's look at Zimbabwe's Private Voluntary Organizations Act, the PVO Act. What does SALC highlight there?
Currently, SALC explains, the PVO Act in Zimbabwe generally requires most NGOs to register to operate legally or get funding, including government funding. There's a process to submit your constitution, publicize the application, get approval from the PVO board.
So registration is pretty central for many CBOs there now. Are there exceptions?
Yes, SALC does list some current exemptions under the Act. State bodies, trusts, religious groups, member benefit-only groups, and purely political ones.
Okay. But SALC also mentions a potential amendment to that PVO Act. What are the key changes they flag that could be coming? Sounds important.
It does. SALC points out this amendment isn't law yet, but it could really shake things up. They suggest it might make registration mandatory for trusts and basically any group collecting funds for charity.
Wow, so broadening the net significantly.
Potentially, yes. And the registrar might get power to compel any organization to register. Plus, SALC notes applicants might need to provide details on beneficial ownership, who really controls the organization. And another point SALC raises is the minister getting power to designate some NGOs as high risk for potential misuse, like terrorist financing, which would force them to register. It suggests potentially much tighter control.
Okay, definitely something for CBOs in Zimbabwe to watch closely. Now, shifting to Malawi, what's the picture there according to SALC's analysis?
SALC highlights a different approach in Malawi. Their NGO Act mandates compulsory registration for all NGOs, local or international, via the NGO authority.
So, no ambiguity there. If you're an NGO, you register.
Pretty much. The application, SALC outlines, involves the Constitution, details of trustees and board members, a ministerial approval letter for planned activities, and a fee.
Anything else specific SALC mentions for Malawi?
Yes, international NGOs need at least 2 Malawian directors. And interestingly, SALC notes NGOs have to declare that their leadership and staff won't get involved in partisan politics.
Okay, quite specific requirements. So let's say a CBO has done all this. They've got their structure, they're registered. Is that it? Job done?
Not quite. SALC really stresses that ongoing operational compliance is just as crucial. You can't just register and forget it.
Right. What does that involve?
It means sticking to the rules of the specific law you're registered under day in, day out. SALC gives examples like filing annual reports, keeping proper accounts, maybe getting audited.
Standard operational stuff, really.
Yes, but legally required.
Yep.
And SALC also reminds us CBOs need to comply with other general laws too, like labor laws if they have employees. It's the whole picture.
And SALC gave specifics for Malawi again, didn't they? What ongoing things do NGOs need to do there?
They did. In Malawi, SALC details requirements like submitting annual audited financials, activity reports, and annual returns. These returns need updated info on trustees, staff, auditors, and importantly, sources of funding.
Transparency on funding, okay.
Yeah, and they have to provide other info if asked. SALC also flags reasons registration can be canceled in Malawi, like stopping work aligned with objectives, breaking the law, or that partisan politics point again.
And consequences for individuals.
Yes, SALC makes a critical point. Individual trustees, CEOs, or managers can actually be held personally liable if the organization commits an offense, so the stakes are high for leadership.
Wow, okay. So pulling all this excellent insight from SALC together, what's the absolute core message for CBOs listening to this?
I think SALC's main takeaway is this. You have choices in how you structure your CBO legally. But the specific rules you must follow, the statutory compliance, will really depend on the structure you choose and the specific laws in your country.
You can't just copy what someone does elsewhere.
Exactly. SALC is essentially saying you absolutely have to get familiar with the laws that apply to you where you operate. Understanding and meeting those requirements isn't just paperwork. It's fundamental, SALC argues, for avoiding legal trouble and ensuring you can actually keep doing the good work you set out to do effectively and for the long haul.
Absolutely. It sounds like treating this legal foundation seriously is actually what enables CBOs to make the biggest difference in the end.
Precisely. By getting this right, using the kind of guidance SALC provides, CBOs operate legally, build trust, and can focus on achieving their mission for their communities.
So, a final thought for everyone listening. Take a moment to think about the legal situation where you are. Based on what we've heard, drawing from SALC's expertise, what's maybe one practical step a CBO, or are part of, could take right now to check they're on solid legal ground? Remember, seeing this not as a burden, but as building that strong foundation for lasting impact. The Southern Africa Litigation Center's work here really gives us a vital starting point.